Morning, everybody. My name is Matt Laidlaw, and on behalf of our team this morning, I want to welcome you to Open Circle. Whether you're joining us online or in person, we're really grateful that you are here and that we're able to share in this experience, in this space together. So per usual, a couple of brief reminders before we get started and before I give the rundown of the morning. First, thank you for wearing a mask while you're here. I know that it can be uncomfortable and inconvenient. There are a lot of people in our community, the Open Circle community, who are sick right now, today. So it's good that they're not here. And hopefully joining us online and getting what they need to get better. But thanks for wearing a mask so that we can make sure that we are all as safe as possible in this space together in person. Second thing I'll mention, past few weeks that we've gathered together, we've done some interactive experiences. I've talked for a long time during the teachings. You may have noticed, like, you're casually looking at your watch around 11:15 going like, oh my goodness, is this thing ever going to end? So thanks for being gracious about that. In our team meeting the past couple weeks, we've been talking about how do we do a little bit better at ending on time? Where can we find a few minutes in the gathering to make sure we're being as intentional as possible with every minute of the gathering? And I was like, we need to find 15 minutes. We got to figure out how to make our gatherings 15 minutes shorter, but still do all the wonderful things that we're doing together. We had some ideas about that, but then as of this morning, we found out that our friend Josh Rose, the musician, isn't able to join us this morning, which is a huge bummer. But I was like, hey, there's our 15 minutes. So we're going to do everything else that we were planning on doing. We're just not going to have music this morning, which is a bummer. And I apologize for that. But as we always do with Open Circle, we'll roll with it. And it'll be what we make it together. So let's see here. I need to talk about masks. I need to say that Josh isn't here. Needed to thank everybody for being here. Oh, yeah. If you consider yourself young or a child, raise your hand right where you are right now. A couple of us? Real high so I can see it, okay? Right now, Lex's hand and back is the highest. Okay. No matter how old you are, in this room or in this building, in this space, I want you to feel at home. I want you to move in the ways you need to move. I want you to not be afraid to be yourself. Make sure you respect your mom or dad or the people who brought you here, but I want you to feel like you can be you in this space. And parents and caregivers, I want you to take a deep breath because we want this to be a space for all ages. We're really glad that everybody is here, regardless of what age they are. Okay, this morning, I was going to give some reminders, and I just did. In a second, I'm going to guide us through our opening practice together. Then Lex Cummings will share our story for all ages. We'll do our brief standing circles practice together, and then I will offer a brief teaching to continue our practicing with series. Sound all right? All right. A few head nods. Fantastic. Okay, so for our opening practice this morning, I'm just going to share a brief poem from our friend Padre Gotuma. We've shared a handful of his poems over the past year, and the more I hear Padre speak, the more I hear Padre's work and read some of his work, the more it just feels like, oh man, if it's like God commissioned a poet to write poetry for our community. It just feels like us. So I'm going to share this brief poem, and then we're going to hold 2 minutes of silence together. And that 2 minutes will be marked by the ringing of a bell. So we'll read, ring a bell, 2 minutes of silence, ring a bell. And during that 2 minutes, I would just invite you to engage in whatever practice would be helpful for you to be here right now. Letting go of the to-do list, turning down the monkey mind, finding your footing in this space. For me, what's helpful is uncrossing my arms and legs, sitting up straight in my chair, feet on the ground, and remembering that I should keep breathing because I'm a human being. And what's true about me is I forget to breathe often. So some deep inhales and exhales are often helpful for me. So I want to invite you to find a position in your chair that communicates openness to yourself and to one another and to God, whatever that looks like for you. And maybe take a few deep inhales and exhales. And hear these words from our friend Padre Gotuma. This is a prayer of shelter in shadow. We know that sometimes we are alone, and sometimes we are in community. Sometimes we are in shadow, and sometimes we are surrounded by shelter. Sometimes we feel like exiles in our land, in our languages, and in our bodies. And sometimes we feel surrounded by welcome. As we seek to be human together, may we share the things that do not fade: generosity, truth-telling, silence, respect, and love. And may the power we share be for the good of all. We honor God, the source of this rich life, and we honor each other, storyful and lovely. Whether in our shadow or in our shelter, may we live well and fully and with each other. Amen. All right. Thank you, everybody. So at Open Circle, we share stories for all ages, stories that are both for the young and the young at heart. And this morning, our story is going to be shared by our friend Lex Cummings. So if you are young, or if you consider yourself young at heart, or you don't consider yourself either of those things, but you want to be able to see the pictures in the story, I want to invite you to come up on stage. You can scale the wall right here and jump up on top like Henry and Charlie are probably going to, or you can climb up these stairs right here and have a seat on the floor on stage.
Yeah. It's not fun when you can parkour with permission. Just saying. Oh, man. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh, we got some more people. So while everyone's coming on up and getting situated, have you guys heard the word refugee before? Yeah. A refugee is someone who leaves their country and goes to a different country for a bunch of different reasons. And one of them could be that their country is really unsafe. So the story this morning is actually about some refugees from the country Vietnam that had a civil war and everything was crazy, and so they needed to be safe. So just think that in the back of your mind as you are listening to this story called Wishes. The night wished it was quieter. The bag wished it was deeper. The light wished it was brighter. The dream wished it was longer. The clock wished it was slower. The path wished it was shorter. The boat wished it was bigger. The sea wished it was calmer. The sun wished it was cooler. And the heart wished it was stronger. The home wished it was closer. And I wished you see, there's a bigger boat. I wished I didn't have to wish. Anymore. Look at that, it's a new city. The end. Yeah.
What was the giant whale tail coming out of the boat?
You know, that's a good question. This right here, I don't think it's a boat. I think it's like a statue that's like a beacon of freedom. But maybe not, you know. It definitely 100% looks like one. I completely agree. Look at that. Right, there you have it. It's very whale-tailish. You're all right. So after this, you are going to head out this door and follow Miss Marin and Jim. And if you haven't gotten a wristband yet, if you and one of your parents would meet me in the lobby and we'll get you all wristbanded. Sound good? Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lex, and thanks everybody for being such good listeners. It's fantastic. All right, we are going to practice what we have been calling our standing circle practice. If you are new to Open Circle, you haven't been here before, or you haven't participated in this practice before, I just want you to know that this practice is completely optional. And then after I explain how we're going to engage in this together, if you don't want to engage in the practice, that's completely fine. You can either signify that either by remaining seated, or you're free to go for a short walk around the building if you'd like, but we'll take about 8 minutes on this practice. So in a moment, I'm going to ask us to stand up together if we want to participate, and we're going to get in groups of 3 or 4 people. Ideally, people that maybe you didn't come here with, and maybe that you haven't even met before, as an opportunity to try and engage one another in a little bit of a different way this morning. And all you really need to know about engaging in this practice is to try and approach it with these 5 intentions: to speak from the heart, to listen from the heart, without saying too much, say just enough, to respect one another, and to trust the process. The process will look something like this. I'm going to put 3 prompts on the screen, and in your groups of 3 or 4, each of you will respond to the first prompt without interruption, just by actively listening to one another. Then each of you will have the chance to respond to the second prompt, then each of you a chance to respond to the third prompt. And by that point, you all will be completely comfortable with each other. You'll be thinking, why did I even hesitate about participating in this practice? And Matt's going to be interrupting you, saying, hey, it's already been 8 minutes. We're all going to be like, holy cow, we could talk forever. That's usually what happens every week. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. So, if you think you'd like to participate in this practice, I'd invite you to stand up right now where you are and do a little survey of the room and look for 2 or 3 other people that you could form a group of 3 or 4 with. And I would invite you to be inclusive of people of all ages in this room if they'd like to participate. All right, I'm seeing a big blob of people in the middle here. Do we got our groups? Does anybody want a group but doesn't have a group? It's okay. You got it? You're going to join there? All right, fantastic. All right, and here's our prompts. The first is, please share your name and how you're feeling about the day ahead of you. It can be the rest of today or tomorrow, however you want to interpret that. The second prompt is, you have to sing karaoke. What song do you pick? Why? And while you're answering that, I'm going to get the karaoke machine out because the prompt says you have to. That's a joke. You don't have to. Hypothetically, if I did do that instead of we had to, what song would you pick? And why? And then last, what do you wish people better understood about you? And why? And with each of these, especially the second one, it could unload a lot of sharing. So I'll just remind you of that third prompt. Without saying too much, say just enough, okay? There's your prompts. We'll do this together for about 8 minutes or so. Okay. Ready, set, go. 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes. So make sure you pace yourself accordingly. All right, friends. If you want to finish the phrase or the sentence that you're in right now and find your seat, can always continue these conversations later. So, it's just such a fun, this is actually my favorite part of the gathering because it's slightly awkward in a really fun way to me. I love the fact that we just want to keep talking with each other, especially because we all feel a little resistant to start talking to each other just 8 minutes ago. So, okay, thank you for lending yourself to that practice with one another. It's a beautiful thing to be a part of, and when I am up here trying to regather us, and I get to see all of us participating in this together, it's like I have the most beautiful point of view of the whole morning. So earlier this week, my wife and I were dropping off our kids at school together, and we were in the school drop-off line. I know what you're thinking right now. That sounds really stressful, right? If you've ever been a part of the school drop-off line with any of your kids at school, you know that there's really 2 things happening there that we could summarize what's actually happening there. One is there are people who are treating it like we are dropping soldiers into enemy territory. We are prepared, and at the exact right moment, they will be parachuting out of the side of our car and going into the building. Our car barely needs to even come to a stop, right? There's those people. And then there's other people who they get to the spot, they don't really quite pull up all the way. Everyone in their car gets out. They start, and every door of the vehicle is open. They start rummaging through all of their possessions. They think, oh, maybe we should have breakfast. We forgot about that. And maybe, totally oblivious to the fact that there's 70 cars behind them, watching them, waiting to get to their spot so that their kids can efficiently parachute out of the side of the vehicle. I'll let you guess which one of those families I might be or how I approach the kids' drop-off line. There's also this third option I've only seen a couple times, which is you pull in and everybody's going the same direction, and either they're parachuting out or it's like a family moment that's taking forever. And then there's somebody who passes everybody and then tries to drive in the wrong way, in the opposite direction, right? That's not as many people. Did somebody just raise their hand and say, that's me? Awesome. Okay. Hey, we all got to be ourselves, right? We're all doing our best. That's actually what I'm trying to remind myself is everybody here is doing their best. I'm doing my best. Hopefully they are too. But it can be a little bit tense and stressful, especially with slippery roads, parents who are rushing to work, kids who might not want to go to school. So we're in this moment, waiting patiently for our turn in line, and there's a pickup truck in front of us, and my wife Stephanie said, "Hey, do you see that sticker on the back of that truck?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." And she said, "Is that what I think it is?" And I said, "I don't know." And later in the day, I had a free moment, and I did some Googling and realized, oh, it is what we think it is. And on the back of this pickup truck that was in front of us was a bumper sticker that was a symbol that is associated with two groups in the United States, both the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. If you're not familiar with the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, good. But also, maybe you should be, maybe we all should be. The Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers are two groups that have been in the news a bit the past couple of years. The Proud Boys are designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And the Oath Keepers are considered one of the largest anti-government organizations in the United States. Both of these groups are associated in some ways in their messaging with white supremacy, and both groups sort of claim to be all about the protection of families, children, and women, but there's also lots of women and children who are associated with members of these groups who might say otherwise. And both of these groups were visibly present at the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th. So I'll be honest, the elementary school kid drop-off thing is like stressful enough already, right? And now I'm thinking, hey, remember the good old days when I just had to deal with the person who wanted to drive the wrong way, or the people who wanted to have a family reunion while we all waited in line? And now I'm thinking, oh, we've got like hate groups here in the drop-off line. All right, this is real life. So I spent a lot of time thinking about that this week. On the one hand, I wasn't surprised. I know where I live. I know who lives in my community, and I live in a wonderful community. And we know in the news that both of these groups and other groups like it and affiliated with them have a very real presence here in West Michigan. So I wasn't surprised. But on the other hand, I was shocked by the openness. Like, at least in my opinion, unless it's just the nonsense dinosaurs eating the other person's stick family, or something to remind us how cool you are because you have a Jeep, like, you've got to really believe in something to put a sticker on your car, right? At least that's how my mind operates. So I was surprised by like the openness of this, and I also felt concern. How much of this sort of ideology might my kids be being exposed to every day at this school? If my kids say something that is contrary to these views around the children of these parents, like, are they safe? Like, how is this intersecting with my kids' lives every day? But I'll be honest in saying, like, the things that I was feeling in the moment when I realized, oh, that really is what that bumper sticker was, the things that were going through my mind were like, frickin' racist, misogynist, stupid white trash, frickin' redneck, misinformed, uneducated, selfish, fascist, divisive, violent. This person thinks they're tough with their Dodge Ram pickup truck and their sticker, but I wouldn't mind running into them somewhere in person to see if we could sort this out. This person's part of the problem. This person is why we're still wearing masks, or at least some of us are. This person and his friends are what is going to end up destroying this country. And I'm ashamed to say that these were the things that were going through my head. These were the things I was feeling in my heart. I experienced someone different than me, who had different views than me, who believes different than me, and I'll be honest, someone that I do genuinely perceive as in some way a threat. And I immediately moved to judgment and labeling and stereotyping. The irony of all of it is that the actual thoughts I was thinking and the feelings I was feeling and the energy with which I was experiencing them resemble the sorts of things I was judging this person for. Like, my judgment of this person was divisive. My judgment of this person was violent. My judgment of this person was separating myself from him and elevating myself over him. I'm better than that person. People who think like me are better than the fools who think or live or believe like that. My judgment of this person who is associating himself with groups that treat people as less than human was actually treating him as less than human. This is a big problem for me. And I think it's actually a big problem for many of us and for our society, maybe even more than we realize. In our attempts to advocate for justice, in our attempts to try and help do our part to bring about a more loving world, in our desire to confront the stories of separateness that we're living in, we often perpetuate them. And sometimes we even amplify them by the ways in which we engage them, by the energy with which we bring to the conversation. Like, for some of us, we're so certain that certainty is the problem. Think about that. Or we want to be inclusive, but not to people who aren't inclusive. This is like what I call Michael Scott Christianity or Michael Scott progressivism, because it exists sort of everywhere on the same plane across the whole spectrum. This is an environment of welcoming, and you should just get the hell out of here. Right? I want to include everybody. Unless you don't, then you're not welcome. It's the same energy. It's the same posture. You treat people poorly? Okay, I'm going to treat you poorly then, because you treat people poorly. And I am better than you because I don't treat people poorly unless they're treating people poorly. I'm a fundamentalist against fundamentalism. Like, I'm certain fundamentalism is the problem. If you separate yourself from others based on race or religion or gender or sexual identity or orientation, well, I'm going to separate myself from you. And most of us are blind to this. We can't see that we're actually bringing the same kind of destructive energy that we think we're fighting against and working to improve. Even if we have the moral high ground, even if we think, of course, this perspective or view is causing harm, even if we know on some level that what we're advocating for is more helpful than it is the harmful thing that's happening over there, we're still bringing the same kind of destructive, violent, or divisive energy to the situation. And we're unaware that in our attempts to try and solve the problem, we're actually perpetuating it because it's rooted in our own judgment. It's rooted in our own self-righteousness. And ultimately, it's rooted in our desire to be separate from others. The safety that comes when we can create our own lives and existences that are distant from those who are different than us, or live different than us, or believe different than us. I think this is a big part of the problem we're facing as individuals and with our own mental health, as families, Thanksgiving dinner table, trying to make sense of the world we're living in right now with relatives, with friendships that have been tried through the politics and the pandemic and the way the world is right now. A big part of the problem we're facing as a society and as individuals and as a community of people who are trying to pursue some kind of authentic, loving, just, and generous way of practicing our spirituality. So what do we do about this? If this is true on some level, that this is how we're operating, and in many ways we're blind to it in our own lives and around us, what do we do? In a small way, for the past 5 months or so as a community, we've been trying to talk about this very thing from as many different angles as possible in this series we've been calling Practicing With. We're trying to look at ancient wisdom. We're trying to look at the teachings of Jesus. We're trying to be open to the science of relationships, and we're trying to recapture the lost art of seeing and hearing one another, of seeing and hearing God, and seeing and hearing this big and beautiful universe that we find ourselves in. And when we started this conversation in September, we started really just talking about awareness. How do we become more aware of these stories of separateness that we're living in? How can I shift my mindset? What are some tools that might help me become more aware of the environments I'm in, the perspectives I have, the relationships I'm engaging in? And over the past several weeks and months, we've slowly shifted from awareness into practice. What are some really basic things I can try and do to practice with, to step out of these stories of separateness that I'm living in and that we're all living in? And in a lot of ways, we've been going for it. With the return to in-person gatherings and on any given Sunday, not knowing who's sick, who has the energy, who can show up, who can be here, who can help, what can we do? We've just sort of said, we're just going to go for it. We're just going to try. We're going to actually talk about the things, and we're going to practice some things together. So, we've done workshop-y things together, and we've talked about some really hard topics together. And I've been, unbelievably impressed by the willingness of this group of people to open yourselves up and to engage and to try new things in this space on Sunday morning with people that you may not know very well. And we're going to keep doing that, and we're going to keep coming back to these things. But I think before we go any further in our own awareness, in our own practice, and in thinking about what it might look like to practice with, I think it's important to name that we can have the best of intentions, that we can root ourselves in a beautiful and expansive, inclusive theology. We can learn science and methodology and ideas. We can grow in our awareness, and we can utilize best practices. We can try some of the things we're talking about. And all of it will help. None of it will be wasted. But the impact and the extent to which it will be transformative in your life and in the world around us, I really think is going to be dependent on one variable. And I think that variable is our capacity for empathy. Best ideas, best practices, open hearts, good intentions, connecting ourselves to the beautiful Christian tradition, expansive, inclusive Christian tradition that we're a part of. But all that's only going to go so far until we can become more aware of this and wrestle with what each of our capacities for empathy actually is. So this is a word that's been thrown around a lot in the past few years. And I think mostly for good. But there probably is some confusion about what does this word actually even mean, and in what ways is it actually even helpful. So I want to try and press into that a little bit further this morning and bring a little bit of clarity from the perspective of practicing with and how it fits with some of the other things that we've been talking about. So first, I think it's important when we talk about empathy to recognize that sympathy and empathy are two things that we often get confused. So sympathy. Sympathy is feeling for people. You can fill in the blank with whatever you want. Often it's associated with a negative experience that somebody is having, or sorrow, or pain, or suffering that somebody is having. So I feel bad for that person. I feel bad that that happened to you. I feel bad that this person I just drove past is sleeping under that bridge. I feel bad that you lost your job. I feel frustrated that that happened to you. Or it can be associated around positive things, like I feel happy. Yeah, I feel happy for you because this good thing happened. Sympathy is feeling for people. Empathy is feeling with people. If you've been tracking with us the past few weeks and months, hopefully that little social discipline window grid might be appearing in your mind right now. Remembering that word with, practicing with, is sort of the sweet spot. That's where we want to be. And feeling for somebody, or that word for, is not a bad way to engage in somebody, but it often perpetuates separateness. It allows us to stay distant from the other human being that we're actually encountering. So sympathy is feeling for somebody. I feel bad for you. Empathy is feeling with people. I feel bad with you. So you might experience something when you're experiencing sympathy. You might be feeling sad for somebody else. That's not bad. But it allows you to remain separate. Empathy is joining the other person in what they're actually experiencing. Sympathy is I feel bad for you. Empathy is I feel bad with you. Sympathy often drives disconnection, because sympathy is usually something that happens to us. You don't realize it. You show up to Open Circle. You're thinking, I'm having an okay morning. I'm looking forward to the day that's ahead. You stand in a circle with somebody and you find out that somebody that they love is sick and in the hospital, or that somebody that they know just lost their job. And you think, I'm feeling sympathy. I feel bad for that person. Something happened to you and it's causing you to feel that way for another person. But it allows us to remain at a distance. And it can even cause us to feel more disconnection from another person, because what happens when we're surprised by an uncomfortable or what we might perceive as a negative feeling? What do we try and do with that? We try to get rid of that feeling as quickly as possible, right? None of us want to sit in discomfort for so long. So when I show up and I'm feeling okay, and then I hear about some bad news and I feel bad for that person and I experience it at a distance, the natural human tendency and temptation is to further distance ourselves from that person and that pain, because we don't want to experience that discomfort any longer. So sympathy can drive disconnection. However, empathy can fuel connection. Because whereas sympathy is something that happens to us, often unexpectedly, empathy is a conscious, vulnerable choice. Empathy is actually a posture. It's me recognizing that in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something inside of myself that knows what feeling you're actually feeling. You are feeling sad because of the thing that happened to you. And instead of me experiencing sympathy and saying, I feel bad for you, it's me approaching consciously with a vulnerable, open posture and saying, I've felt bad before too, maybe even about something similar. I can recognize that pain in my own life and story. I can recognize the pain that you are experiencing because of what you're encountering, and we're going to experience that pain together now, in this moment, and in the days and weeks ahead. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy fuels connection. And we don't just know this sort of thing from good modern, social science and the science of relationships. The idea that connection really happens when you're willing to walk in somebody else's shoes, when we allow ourselves to feel affected by what somebody else is experiencing and join them in it, that of course relationship happens. It's helpful that we know a little bit more about why that works from good social science, but it's actually also rooted in the heart of ancient wisdom and the Christian tradition. The Apostle Paul in Philippians chapter 2, a pretty well-known text. Paul says this to the church in Philippi: "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to be used for his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very form of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross." Now, often we read stories like this and we think, okay, this is Paul's take, Paul reporting something that happened back then. Paul is telling us about something that happened back then and what it meant back then and what it might actually mean for us now, usually rooted in understanding some sort of belief, right? Having the right doctrine, having the right theology, and trying to orient our lives and behaviors around that. And Paul's doing a little bit of that for sure. Paul's telling us that in his understanding of the mystery of the universe and the divine, that the mystery of God in Christ made himself nothing in the form of a servant, took on human likeness, did not consider his advantage and his separateness to be held as his own privilege, but entered into the mess of human life, entered into the blood and guts and sweat and tears of all of human history. Paul's saying that actually happened. And I think that can bring us some comfort. This is an aside. Holy cow, we often overlook that whatever your connection or affiliation is with the Christian tradition, at the heart of this thing is the recognition that whatever is beyond us, the transcendent, whatever that is more than we could possibly imagine, wherever all of this stuff came from, you and me and everything and everybody else, that wherever that came from at one point joined the mess of it, all of it, with us. That's a remarkable claim. Paul's telling us that that's what happened and that that's what the God of the universe is like as Paul understands it. But Paul is actually also showing us a pattern. This is how the universe actually works. This is how transformation actually takes place. This is where we find the mystery of God now, not just a story about what happened back then. Our invitation is to not just say, that's a beautiful story. And yes, it does bring me some comfort. Our invitation is to participate in this pattern. That when we encounter the blood and guts and sweat and tears and messiness of life in human existence, that we don't encounter it by judging or fixing or convincing. We participate in this pattern and we join. We join it. And that somehow the mystery of Christ tells us that that's where redeeming and transformation and change actually happens, not by judging or fixing or convincing, but by joining. I think Paul's showing us in this text that joining is the pattern of divine action in the world. And Jesus personifies this pattern of what you could call divine empathy. In Christ, God didn't say, I feel really bad for those people. It's this really scandalous claim, I feel really bad with these people. And that's where beauty and change and transformation and connection in witness actually takes place. So whether the science of it is compelling or the ancient text of it intersects with your life in some way, I think both of these things lead us to a question that I think we all need to ask and answer honestly when it comes to any desire to try and practice with in some sort of meaningful way. To what extent am I willing to allow my life to be affected and impacted by the pain of others? To what extent am I willing to allow my life to be affected and impacted by the pain of others? To what extent am I willing to allow myself to be inconvenienced by another person's circumstances? To what extent am I willing to bend my life toward joining the pain of others? To what extent am I willing to join and jump into the mess of somebody else's life? To what extent might I be willing to say that your pain and my pain is now our pain? To what extent might I be willing to walk in another person's shoes? I think this is the question connected with empathy that will, in some way, determine how much any of this stuff we've been talking about is going to have any impact in our lives or in the world around us. I think this is the question to wrestle with. A couple of thoughts that might be helpful as we continue to wrestle with this. Just around empathy in general, if we think about, no, I want to grow in this way. I want to be able to say to a larger extent than I am right now. I want to be willing to allow my life to be open and be impacted by the pain of others. But I need to press into this empathy thing a little bit further. So a couple of things. First one is sort of an aside, and then we'll come back to the path we're on. When it comes to empathy, it's important to recognize that empathy isn't moral equivalence. Here's what I mean by that. Saying, I feel bad with you, or I feel joy with you, or I'm here with you, or I'm willing to walk in this person's shoes, doesn't mean that what you believe or what that other person believes doesn't matter. It's not saying that, hey, Matt, you and that, white nationalist guy, you're really just the same. What you believe is the same. It doesn't really matter. No. Some views and beliefs and perspectives are more helpful. It's a generous way of talking about white supremacy and white nationalism, but okay. Some views or beliefs or perspectives are more helpful. Some views, some beliefs, some perspectives are more harmful. But all people are valuable. And empathy allows for the possibility of us connecting person to person on a human level, which has to be the foundation of any sort of ideological conversation or debate. Otherwise, it's just more division, more judgment, more self-righteousness, more separateness. Some beliefs are more helpful. Some beliefs are more harmful. All people are valuable. More judgment and more self-righteousness and more separateness and more stereotyping aren't going to change anything. Empathy is not moral equivalence. That's our side. Let's step back in. Okay, what is empathy if we want to press a little further into this? Here's a simple framework of 5 really basic points. Some of this comes from Brené Brown, combined with a couple things from restorative practices that we've been talking about, but it's helpful for me in a really, really practical way. So if you're the sort of person that writes things down, this might be, write down these 5 little points that might be helpful for you to take with you. First, empathy is perspective taking. It's the ability to take the perspective in another person and to recognize the perspective as their truth. I'm willing to recognize that this person is operating in a certain way or believing certain things or at least has a certain perspective, and I'm trying to see it and understand it in the ways that I can, but at the very least, I can acknowledge it as their truth. This is what they're operating from. I don't have to say it's the truth. I don't have to say it's my truth. I can at least honor it as a perspective that this human being has, and I can honor it as their truth right now in this moment. Empathy is perspective taking, recognizing another person's perspective, allowing it to intersect with your own. Second, empathy is staying out of judgment. What did we learn from Reverend Ted Lasso a few weeks ago? Be curious, not judgmental, right? In some way, curiosity is the opposite of judgment. When I'm sitting there in the school drop-off line and I see that sticker, and my mind starts spinning, and I look it up later, and I immediately go to judgment, I didn't ask the question that I gave us a few weeks ago. I didn't say, I wonder why that is. I went through my list of things that were annihilating this other human being in my heart and in my mind. Be curious. Stay out of judgment. Third, empathy is recognizing emotion in other people. What are they feeling? What is it that they are possibly experiencing right now in this moment? This person is being an inconvenience to me, or this person is being a jerk, or this person is making my life really hard, or I disagree with this person in a million different ways, or it is like this person stays up all day or all night and works all day to try and figure out ways to make my life as hard as possible. Maybe you've encountered a handful of people like that in your life. It's okay. But ask, what is this person feeling? That might be informing the way that this person is acting in their life and in the ways that it's intersecting with my life. What is the emotion that might be fueling another person's behavior? What are they feeling? Fourth, connected to that, empathy is allowing yourself to feel that emotion and communicate that emotion. This person's feeling lonely. Okay, I can recognize that. When have I felt lonely? Do I feel lonely right now? How have I dealt with my loneliness? Am I able to access that feeling of loneliness that I once had in some way to allow myself to feel the loneliness that they're experiencing right now? Can I remember when I felt that? Can I feel it now with them? And can I tell them? Not in a like, well, I've been lonely before too. Dismisses it. That's, I think, connected to sympathy, right? But no. I see that you feel lonely. I feel with you that loneliness. Can we recognize it in them? Can we access it in ourselves? Can we have any communication or dialogue about that shared feeling or emotion? And then last, empathy is allowing yourself to join people in their circumstances. That's back to the question I asked a few minutes ago. To what extent? Are you willing to allow your life to be affected and impacted by the pain of others? To what extent might you be willing to join people in their circumstances, to where their pain is no longer just their pain? And your pain is no longer just yours, it's ours. Together. I wish that earlier this week, when I saw that sticker and thought about it, that my impulse would have been to say, I wonder why that is. Or, what's his name? Or, what happened? What happened to him? Or what did he do? Or what has been the story of his life that led him to this moment in time? Or the moment in time when he thought, I'm not going to put the dinosaur stickers on my truck. I'm going to put the Proud Boys sticker on my truck. What happened? Or, I wonder what it feels like to be him. Or I wonder if he'd ever want to grab a coffee or a beer sometime. The American writer and philosopher Henry David Thoreau offers this statement of wondering. Could a greater miracle take place than for us to look through each other's eyes for an instant? Could a greater miracle take place than for us to look through each other's eyes for an instant? If we want to step out of the stories of separateness that we're all living in, if we want to practice with, growing in our capacity to practice empathy is an essential ingredient. These are the kinds of miracles that we need. But these aren't impossible miracles. These miracles are very possible, and they're within reach. The ability to try and look through each other's eyes just for a moment. What kind of miracle would that be? It's possible if we're willing to do the work. If we want to live in a different story together, if we want to start swimming upstream against the current of separateness that we find everywhere we go, every time we look at our phone or turn on the television, from every politician or pastor or whatever, the divisiveness, the violence, the separateness, if we want to try and swing things in a different direction and practice with one another, these are the sorts of miracles we need. And this is the sort of work we need to be willing to do together. If you're willing and able, please stand with me. A couple of reminders before we go this morning. Thank you to everybody who continues to help chip in to make Open Circle possible, whether it's helping with setup or cleanup. We're running on a skeleton crew these days because of how full and chaotic people's lives are right now. So thank you for everyone who helps and has helped and will help in the future. If you want to make a financial contribution to Open Circle, to our mission, and to make more gatherings like this happen, you can do this at opencirclecommunity.org/give or in the cash box out in the exhibit hall. We continue to collect items for Dégagé Ministries. We've delivered 8 pretty large bags of items that you all have brought in. It's meeting an immediate need. There's a black bucket in the exhibit hall. If you show up with a toothbrush or a stick of deodorant or a pair of boots, whatever, every little bit helps. There's a list of items on the table by the black bucket where you can find out more about how you can contribute. We're going to keep doing this. And if stuff gets dropped off, we'll make sure it gets to Dégagé. Next Sunday, we're back. Lexi Adams will be joining us as our musician for the first time. I'm really excited about that, and I'm going to keep going with this conversation on practicing with that we've had. Our February update email came out on Thursday. If you don't receive those emails, go to opencirclecommunity.org, put your name and email address in the Get Connected box. We're not going to email you more than once or twice a month. Most months it'll be once a month, and it'll just have a really detailed list of all the things going on in our community. There's a new group getting started this month that we're really excited about. So check out our website and social media to get more information about that. I'm not going to tell you what it is because I want you to check it out online, okay? Or you can come talk to me afterwards and I'll tell you a little bit more. And then after we grab some coffee and treats and remember to pick up our kids from childcare, in about 20, 25 minutes or so, a few of us are going to start cleaning up. If you're around and you're willing to carry a couple of totes from over here down the hall, we'll take all the help that we can get. So, if you're willing, maybe open your hands in front of you if that's something you're comfortable with. Close your eyes and receive these words of blessing and benediction. My Open Circle family, this week, may you know what is real. May you believe that neither life, nor death, nor the present, nor the future, nor any powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all of the universe will ever be able to separate you from the love of God. And may you have peace. Peace be with you, my friends. Have a great week.